What is good, YouTube? Welcome into the first ever edition of Catch and Counter with Jack and Nibs. So I am Jack, as you guys can see on the screen. I got my guy Nibs right here to the side of me. So Nibs, how you feeling about us unveiling? We got the new logo that we put out there, and how you feeling that we got our first ever episode premiering right now?
First of many, sir.
Mm-hmm.
First of many.
Absolutely.
And you know what? We putting the rest. The expert hour is no longer. Get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Catch and counter, baby. Rock with us.
Abs- Absolutely. We had some good times on that show too, but it was time for some rebranding and stuff. So I like where this is headed. So it's a good time to start off too, because we got some big fights coming up. So I think we're starting right at the perfect time. The first one that we'll talk about is a fight Tuesday. We got Naoya Inoue against Cool Boy Stephen Fulton, a fight that I've wanted to see for a long time. And if we didn't have a particular fight later on that week, it could be, I think, the most anticipated fight of the whole year. So we'll get into predictions and stuff like that. But first of all, just how do you feel about just all these big fights? They're finally being announced, and the fact that I feel like a few years ago, this is a fight that we wouldn't have seen. You got Inoue, undisputed champion, moving up, fighting Fulton in his first fight. Fulton was going to move up to 126, decides to say. So what do you think it says
Mhm.
about both those guys, just their championship mentality, and obviously just the fact that we are getting this fight?
Bro, I mean, you look at it, right? Let's look at the particulars of the fight first. You got two
Mm-hmm.
guys that are still young enough. They're in the primes of their career. You got Fulton at 29, Fulton at 29, in a way at 30. These aren't guys, 35, 40 years old, right? So they're young enough. Undefeated records, both of them. 21-0 for Fulton, 24-0 for Inoue. So again, we're getting these guys right when we would want this fight to be made anyway. Um, I think, to be honest with you, like I'm surprised, but I love it. Like I think Tank and Ryan Garcia kind of made it to where, follow the blueprint, bro. Two guys who really want to fight each other. They made it happen. They were young enough for people to still be interested in it. You get more people to follow you to follow and be interested in the fight when you're making it right away, as opposed to, or as early on in the process as possible, as opposed to later. Because you look at Spence and Crawford, just because it's the biggest fight that can be made, people are still interested in it, but maybe not as much as there would have been a couple of years back. You know what I mean? So I'm just glad we're getting the fight. We're getting it earlier on in the process, and man, I've gone back and forth, bro. I initially, when this fight got made, I said, "Oh, Fulton's gonna box the shit out of him." He's. I thought he was a lot taller, but he's not. He's 5'6" and weighs 5'5". He's still got a 3.5 inch reach advantage, so I think that'll play into it. But Inoue is a monster, bro. He's got the perfect nickname. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what I'm saying? So I think Inoue is actually going to win this fight. Late stoppage. But if Fulton can get on his horse, who knows? But that power is something else, bro.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why it's an interesting fight. We see a lot of fights when we have the puncher against the boxer. But I don't think Inoue gets enough credit for his boxing skills, which is something we talk about a lot too. Like he's got boxing skills too. It might not be as clean as Fulton or some of these other guys, but I mean he's still got the skills to back it up. When the fight had first been announced, I was kind of 50-50 on it. I thought Fulton had a real path to victory, and I still think he definitely does, but I think after the more I watch, the more I do favor Inoue, and he just has, to me, that he really does have like a great um ability just of anticipation and then timing too. The way he's able to time guys up, he's able to hit him with the perfect shots. I think that even if Fulton, I think Fulton is going to have sustained periods of success where he's able to outbox Inoue. I think that it's when Inoue is able to close that gap and when he's able to time him up and get him with some big shots. I think how Fulton reacts is going to be able to tell us maybe even how the fight goes. And if he's able to weather the storm and get back to boxing, I think he can get the job done. Easier said than done, though, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, when you in there with a literal monster, bro, like the dude doesn't give a shit about what's coming his way. You know what I mean? And I think even more so with the Fulton style. I mean, Fulton's got 8 knockouts, bro. Last time he had somebody in some trouble was what, 2019, when he got his last stoppage. Um, he's not putting people away. I don't think he's got enough punching power to keep a guy like Inoue off of him, because I think even if you did have power, I think Inoue is going to be walking through that. So I mean, like you said in our our pregame here, he was walking through Daenerys punches and he walked out of that with a busted orbital bone. Like, come on, bro. You know what I mean? In their first fight. So I think Inoue is just going to be able to walk through what Fulton's throwing at him. Like you said, it's going to be, how much closer is their boxing ability than, than the power difference is. I think, Inoue's got the power advantage going away. But if their boxing ability is anywhere close to, each other, then this is going to be easy work for Inoue, bro.
It is funny because I see a lot of people saying that Fulton has to kind of keep Inoue at distance. I do think that is a good point. I think from far range, I think Fulton has the advantage. From mid range, I think that's where Inoue is at his best. I think when he's kind of not too inside to smother his shots, but not too far outside where he's out of range is when he's able to pick and use that timing, like I just talked about, to land his big shots. But I do think Fulton can kind of, not the same way, but even kind of how Tyson Fury was able to kind of go right at Wilder, get on the inside and smother Wilder's punches, which seemed crazy at first when he was saying it to us, but we all saw him do it and we saw him have success like that. So it's different because Inoue has more dimensions than a Deontay Wilder does, but I do think Fulton is a pretty good inside fighter. We've seen he does slip shots on the inside and counter really well, and he does run his hands on the inside. So the combination of boxing from the outside, and if he's able to switch it up and go on the inside and keep Inoue more on the back foot. And if he's not allowing Inoue to get as much leverage into his shots, he could maybe the power wouldn't be as bad coming back. So I think that's something that people should think about too. Is it's not just Fulton's ability from the outside, but it's his ability from right in close. Because that's another way you can kind of attack a puncher is just by going right at his chest too. And Fulton probably will be the bigger, stronger guy in there. Inoue is moving up in weight, but he's always he's one of those guys who I think had really sucked himself dry to make 108. 112, 115. So I think he's bigger than people give him credit for, but Fulton is still the bigger, stronger guy. So if he's able to kind of smother Inoue's work, I think that could be another path for him also.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think these guys are both professionals. I think they're going to both make the weight easily. I think Inoue will. I think Fulton's probably going to have the harder of the time making the weight because I think he should have moved up, a couple of fights ago. But it'll be interesting to see if that does have an issue with either one of them. I don't think it'll affect Inoue as much as maybe Fulton. If Fulton has any trouble making the weight in camp, just we haven't heard about it, and you see the effects of that in the fight, he'll make Inoue's job easy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I think if they both come in shape, which all reports show that they have, you know what I mean? To me, it really comes down to, can Fulton keep up his masterness of boxing against Inoue, bro, who's not going to stop coming at him. You know what I mean? This is going to be a guy who's going to be in your chest all night long. And can you weather that storm? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think he's going to have to earn Inoue's respect at some point too. And a lot of people think of that as he's going to have to land a big shot. He's going to have to rock him. It's not even rocking him. We talked about Floyd in our pre-fight thing too, just on a few different conversations. But even with him, I think he's a bigger puncher than Fulton. But it's even with Fulton, as long as if he can hit Inoue sharply, I think that's a way to get his respect too. He's not the biggest puncher. A lot of guys aren't the biggest punchers, but if you're able to land a sharp counter shot and really you make the guy rethink things, especially in 8-ounce gloves and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that Fulton will have a lot of success early on in the fight, and I think that it'll be interesting to see when, like I said before, if he does get hurt or if Inoue does start to get some momentum, how he kind of deals with that. So, because we've seen in the Figueroa fight, which that's a fight I thought he won. It was a real close fight, but he did spend too much time, I think, on the ropes. And I think against a guy like Inoue, you are going to have to be in the center of the ring more, and you can't just sit up on the ropes and look for a counter because Inoue will tee off in those situations also.
And before people get to jumping in my DMs and giving me shit for switching on Fulton, let me tell you something. Go look up Inoue's record, bro, and you look at his opponents. You know what I'm saying? Inoue's a level of opponent is much stronger than Steve Fulton. No disrespect to Steve Fulton and the people he's beaten, but I think that the biggest name on his ledger is Brandon Figueroa, and he had trouble with him, right? There are a lot of people who think a lot of different things. He won that fight, but he has some problems. The only fight really I've seen, Inoue have a problem with was the first time he fought Nonito. We talking about a Hall of Fame dude. Then he knocks him. I mean, he smokes him out in the second in the second go round, in the second round. So when you look at that, and again, we're talking about a guy who can box, who just so happens to have dynamite in both of his hands. You know what I mean? This isn't a guy who's just a puncher. He's a guy who thinks boxing first, but can get rid of you. His boxing sets up his power. You know what I mean? So, his 24-0, 21 knockouts are legit. These aren't, oh, I got some gift stoppages because the guy's head snapped back when, a way the ref didn't like it. Nah, he's finishing these people. So take that into consideration when you're thinking about what's going on here. If you think that their boxing level is anywhere close to each other, Inoue wins this fight, bro.
Yeah, and just to go what you said about the resume, Inoue is 19-0, I think, in title fights with 17 knockouts or something like that. That alone is crazy. I mean, I do think Fulton has a real shot in this fight, but Inoue has almost as many title fights as Fulton does real fights, and he has double the knockouts in title fights than Fulton has in real fights. At the end of the day, I'm one of the biggest people of saying skills pay the bills, and I do still believe that. But I think that if Inoue has enough skills to pay the bills, he's got the power, which could end up being a difference. And I think which I am a betting man, I guess I'm not going to bet on this fight per se.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick one guy, I think that would make me lean towards Inoue in this one.
Yeah, and I'm saying this as a full-fledged Fulton fan, right? I want Fulton to win this fight. Let's be very clear. I want him to win so that he can go on and do what I think he will do, which is have a Hall of Fame level career. I think he can still do it even if he loses, to be honest with you, because I think a loss to Inoue at this point in Inoue's career is not going to hurt you. But I just when I look at them overall. And like you say, we're talking about 19 fights in championship fights. He's only got 24 fights, bro. So you're talking about 5 of his fights weren't for a belt. So this dude's been fighting for belts pretty much his whole career, whereas Fulton has been doing it, the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think he's got Fulton's 3-0 title fights. So it's just recently he got up there. And he's fought some good guys on the way up. Like he fought guys like Adam Lopez and certain guys on the way up that he didn't have to fight per se. So he has a very impressive resume for a guy who's just coming on the scene now. But like I said, I think the depth overall of Inoue's resume, even if we don't know some of the names on the resume, you know that he's fought in title fights for a long time.
How many Hall of Famers does he have on his record, on his legend?
Yeah.
Inoue fought a legend twice. You know what I mean? Smoked it. And then on top of this, a lot of people say, oh, well, Nonito was, later in his years, when he fought him the second time. Yeah, but look at what Nonito's done since that loss to Inoue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. After the first loss, he had 2 knockout wins over undefeated guys, became a world champion. And even now, he's going to fight this week now on the Spence Crawford undercard for a chance to become champion again. So shout out to Jesus M and for everyone else tuning into this first ever episode. One thing he said, I don't know if you have seen this at all, but he says Fulton is mind games with hand wraps, all to get views. So Fulton's trainer in the press conference was saying things about how Inoue, which I've heard before, because I think Nonito's wife Rachel had mentioned it, that they stack the wraps. And the way they do the wraps, they do a lot of tape on the skin, which a lot of people don't like. So do you read anything into that? I think it's more what Jesus is saying. I think that if I'm Fulton's trainer, I would do the same thing. I think that are they necessarily calling him a cheater? I don't think so. I think they're more, just like I said, more mind games, and they're trying to say get any advantage that you can going into the fight. But do you read anything into that? Because I think a lot of people have, but I don't know how to really look into it.
I don't look into it as he's cheating. I look at it as they want to raise as much doubt as they can now. So if they do catch an L, they can come back later and be like, oh well, we told you. Or investigate this, or let's try to fight the win or or the loss or whatever, right? There's no history of Inoue being a dirty fighter. There's nobody that can even remotely say or think that he's done this, that, or the third. I mean, here's my thing. If you got proof, show it to me. And I'll be the first one to be like, "Fuck that guy, get him out of there." But there's no proof of it, bro. So I don't take anything with it. But to me, I think it shows that they're legitimately scared of Inoue's power. Whether they are or not is yeah, he's fought some guys with some power before, but not like Inoue, bro. And I get Inoue's technically the smaller guy, but let's be clear, he's going to be able to hurt Fulton.
And I think when we see it the weigh-in, we're going to see that the size thing has gotten kind of overrated a bit too. I don't think there's going to be much a difference between those two guys size-wise. I think that Fulton will maybe be a bit bigger if one's going to be bigger, but I do think in a way he is moving up from 118 to 2022 for a challenge, but it's also because it's not like he was making 118 easily walking around it that way. He had some troubles, not troubles, but he had a tough time making 118 at the end, so it's a natural move up in weight also. It's his fourth weight class, so people see it as he's dared to be great, which he absolutely is. But it's not like he's some small guy who's going to be a midget in there against Stephen Fulton. I think he's going to be pretty close to the same size, so I don't think that there's an advantage one way or the other on that. But
and so what if he is? You look at Tank, right? Tank is shorter than damn near, with the one exception of Isak Cruz. He's shorter than everybody he fights, usually by a lot, and he's putting these dudes out. You know what I'm saying? I don't think size matters in boxing, bro. Like, if you know how to use your size to your advantage, I don't think height really makes a difference, bro. And then when you've got otherworldly power, let's face it, he's got generational power. Inoue does. We're not talking about, there's no other guy in his weight class who's are in or around his weight class that's hitting the way he does.
Yeah,
he's
you got to go all
afraid of him.
Yeah, you got to go all the way up to 135 to Tank to find someone who's even in the same ballpark in a conversation for that. So the one reason I do love this fight, because we've talked about the resumes a bit, but neither guy I don't think has ever fought somebody like they're going to be fighting. Like, I don't think Inoue has ever fought somebody who's as strong and that has a boxing ability that Fulton does. And I don't think Fulton has ever fought somebody with the power, the explosiveness that Inoue has. So I think that's a great thing too. Anytime we can answer these questions about these guys where they are great fighters, but when you have two guys who haven't fought anybody like their opponent, I think that's a great thing also.
And you bring up a great point, right? We've been blowing up Inoue, louding him, giving him all his flowers. But let's not forget, Fulton can put on a master class in boxing, right? To your point, Inoue hasn't seen that either, right? So if Fulton can put on that master class of boxing, give Inoue things he hasn't seen before, and neutralize his power, then it's a cakewalk for him, come Tuesday. So, it really depends on who implements their game plan the most, right? If Fulton can take his power and or neutralize it, and again, like you said, Inoue's coming up in weight. He's coming, he's going to be looking up, albeit an inch, and Fulton has a sizable reach. I mean, 3.5 inches in boxing, as far as a reach advantage is a lot. So if Fulton can keep him away from him and put on his a show, get on his bike, hey man, we might be looking at a shutout. It might be boring, for some people to watch, but if Fulton can make this fight boring, bro, he wins it going away.
Yeah, but if he can make it boring, like I said, for some people it will be, but I think me and you would enjoy the shit out of that if he was able to shut out. I don't care how boring it is if he's able to win a shutout performance like that, I think it would be great. So pound for pound implications.
Bro, a shutout against Inoue, bro? Come on, man.
Shit. That would be one of the best wins we've seen in a long, long time. I think no matter how either guy wins, I think it's up there. So pound for pound implications are big in this fight. Do you think that? I think a lot of people already have Inoue as their number one pound for pound. I have him in my top 3. But do you think that if he wins pound for pound, or him or Fulton per se, do you think that they would be the pound for pound king, at least until the end of this week, and then once we see the Spencer Crawford fight?
I think if Inoue does, and it depends on how he does it, right? Like if he like dominates Fulton or knocks him out, I want to say probably before the 6th round. If he knocks him out halfway through the fight, because I have him as number 2. You know what I mean? Behind Bud right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the only thing me and ESPN agree on.
Mm-hmm.
I got Bud 1 and Inoue 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if Inoue wins, and and again, then it depends on what happens with the Bud and Spence fight, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think if Inoue wins and he's impressive, you got to put him number one. If Bud struggles, or now if Bud and Spence give us a classic fight, then it's null and void. It doesn't fucking matter, in my opinion. But I think it depends on how either one of these guys win. If Stephen Fulton comes in there and completely whitewashes Inoue, which has never been done ever, or even come close to,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's more impressive. But I don't have Fulton high enough on my list for him to overtake number one. I think he moves into the top three again,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what happens, with Bud and Spence. So to answer your question, I think what happens with Bud and Spence will tell us who's number one. But I think these guys can make a case for number one depending on how much of a show they put on.
Yeah, and that's why these debates are tough because I don't even like having them sometimes. But I know there's a lot of people are going to be talking about it this week, and they probably wanted to hear our opinion because, like you said, at the end of the day, it's not just if you win or lose; it's how you win. Because we have to see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when people have the same debate that I just brought up, and they're like, "Oh, if this guy beats this guy, where do you rank him?" It's like, well, does he win a split decision? Does he whitewash him? Does he knock him out? So all those ingredients kind of go into it, and obviously we'll have a better answer for you guys Tuesday morning, and then also Saturday night once Spencer Crawford fight.
I think in order for me, for pound, right? I think you have to do something nobody's expecting you to be able to do against
Mm-hmm.
this guy. Nobody's expecting Stephen Fulton to be able to dog walk, Inoue for 12 rounds. Nobody's expecting Inoue to be able to knock Stephen Fulton out with one punch or quickly. Like if it does happen, maybe in the later rounds, when he gets tired or something like that. So do something we're not expecting and do it in a spectacular fashion. For me, that's what'll change the pound for pound rankings. Um, and then again, it depends on, like, if Bud and Spence give us a stinker, then I think whoever wins this fight has an opportunity to say, "Hey, I'm the number one guy."
Mm-hmm.
Because if let's say you're Fulton, right, and I don't think most people have him in their top five, right? But let's say you do. Let's say you got him at five. If he beats Inoue, who most people have either one or two, right, or three
Mm-hmm.
at the lowest, he can say, "Hey, I beat the guy."
Mm-hmm.
you know, what else do I got to do?
Yeah, nah, exactly. So we got Jesus is on record saying he's got Fulton by split decision. I It's so tough because I think I will probably pick Inoue if I had to, but I do see a real path to victory for Fulton too. Like I said, if he's able to mix up the outside boxing with also fighting on the inside and smothering Inoue, I think he's got a real shot. It is also in Japan, and even though it's all neutral judges, Japan has normally done pretty good with their judging. Inoue is their big cash cow, so does Fulton have to win 8 or 9 wins? I think that's to be determined, but I think if I had to make an official pick, I'd probably pick Inoue by decision at the end of the day.
Hey, Seuss, I tell you what, buddy. If that, because I hope that happens.
Yeah.
If that's how Fulton wins this fight, I'm taking a shot just for you, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we do it on this show.
Yeah.
But I hope it happens because I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Fulton fan. I think Inoue's got too much.
Yeah, and that's what I don't want people to get mistaken when we're saying we're picking Inoue. We have both been on the record multiple times saying we want Stephen Fulton. I will be watching that fight Tuesday morning, hoping and praying and being so nervous and hoping that Stephen Fulton can win. Like I will be so happy if he does win, and I wouldn't even care. That's when it comes down to I would rather be happy than be right. Like I don't give a shit if I pick Inoue to win. I want Fulton to win. So I don't want people to think that, oh, we're going against the American guy, this and that. All we're doing is making a pick at the end of the day, and we're both going to be rooting our asses off of Stephen Fulton come Tuesday morning.
Bro, it's like when Deontay and Wilder had their third fight. Everybody knows I'm a huge Deontay Wilder fan.
Mm-hmm.
I think the world of that dude. I picked Fury to whoop his ass.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Now, do I like Fury? Hell no. But I
Mm-hmm.
gotta respect what that man can do, right? It's the same thing, bro. Like, I want Steve Fulton to win this fight, but I think in a way is gonna and I'm almost sad to say I think it's gonna be a bad knockout. Like I think it's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
bad. You know,
Yeah.
we'll see.
You know what I mean? I think the
That's why.
Vega, yeah, The Vegas odds in a way is, I think the odds are a little wide. I think in a way is like a 4-1 favorite right now, which a slight favorite I could see. I think 4-1 is a bit wide. He's favored to even win. It's like 2-1 to win by knockout, which I thought was definitely wide also. So I think if there is some betting
Lightweight
value,
disrespectful.
and that's what I'm saying. As I think that we are picking in a way, but I think we both agreed that if you're a better and you're looking for value, I do think that Stephen Fulton, even a Stephen Fulton by decision, most likely at a plus 300 or plus 200, something like that, is pretty damn good value at the end of the day too. Especially because I think even if I'm picking in a way, I think that's like 55-45 if anything.
Hey, at least he ain't getting Stephen Shaw numbers. That guy. Oh man. But yeah, nah, I mean, look, this is a coin flip, right? We're nitpicking, because that's our job, right? But let's be real clear. You can flip a coin and bet on that guy. Whoever the coin tells you to, bet on that guy. Because there's a good chance that guy is going to win. You know what I mean? No matter who it is, whether it's Fulton or Inoue, there's a good chance either one of these guys win, and they win in exactly how you think or wish or hope they will. And that's what, again, you said it a couple of times. That's what makes these kind of fights so exciting, because you don't know, right? It's like the Spence and Bud fight. We don't know. We think we do. We hope. We have dreams and aspirations. We hope these things are going to happen. But you never know, because they are so close, right? There's no one that can say, oh, well, Bud ain't shit compared to Spence, or Spence ain't shit compared to Bud. No, you can't say that. Both of those guys have a legitimate chance of winning that fight. Inoue and Fulton both have a legitimate chance of winning this fight. For my money, I'm going to put it on Inoue.
And it's crazy because I feel like I always side with the boxer over the puncher, but this isn't your average boxer versus puncher matchup either, like we've talked about. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of fans from both sides have kind of been downplaying the other opponent. And I always hate when this shit happens in boxing, because, like, do you realize, let's say if you're an Inoue fan, you're saying, oh, Fulton can't punch, he lost to Figueroa, like Inoue is going to steamroll him. Or if you're a Fulton fan saying, oh, Inoue hasn't fought anybody, like Fulton's going to outbox the shit out of him. Well, do you guys realize that when you do that, you then take away from the victory of the guy you want to win too? Like, I think even fighters in promotion have done that before too. They're like, oh, I'm going to kill this guy. This guy's not good, this and that. Like, well, what if you beat him in a close fight? Then all the fans are going to say, well, you were supposed to smoke this guy, this and that. So at the end of the day, it's all good to be a fan of someone. Like, we're both fans of Fulton. We're hoping he wins this fight, but we're still being realistic in this outcome too. We're not saying that either guy sucks or anything like that, because I don't think that could be further from the truth either.
You know what I think is one of the lessons people can take away from Floyd that they haven't recently? Everybody wants to be him because he's made the most money, yada yada yada. But if you look at his leading up to the fight, he talked a lot of shit, but it was never, this guy hasn't fought anybody. This guy isn't shit. He's not shit compared to me. You know what I mean? I'm the bar. Ain't everybody else ain't shit compared to me. Now this dude is beating yada 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 yada, but he's not gonna beat me. A lot of the fighters nowadays, to your point, right? They'll say, "Oh, well, who has he fought? He's a bum. He's this. He's that." Well, then you're like you said, you're taking away from your victory. If you beat him, then hey, according to you, you should have, because he was a bum, right? Now, if you lose to him, well, what happened? You just lost to a bum.
And that's what I want, like, fans, fighters, everyone to realize, that all you're doing is hurting yourself at the end of the day. I got no problem with you having confidence and stuff like that. And even like Ray said here, we'll get to the other comments right above this too. But even this was the one fight that Floyd didn't, because he had always said, oh, this guy's a hell of a fighter, this and that. The Gotti fight, he said right from the beginning, I'm an A+ fighter. This guy's a C+ fighter. And like Ray said, he went out and proved it at the end of the day. So I think Floyd is different from the rest of these guys too. And it's funny because that is the one exception where he was saying, listen, like, I got this dude. He ain't on my level at all.
But he was right.
You know what I mean? Couldn't have been any more right.
He couldn't have been any more right. Gotti was a guy we all loved because he was Gotti. You know what I mean? He was going to give you blood and guts no matter whether you won or lost. You know, even in that fight, you could see he didn't want to give up. His corner was telling him no, and he had to accept it. But, let's face it, when you go around and don't touch the guy, or there are times in a fight where this dude's getting off 20 fights or 20 punches in a row unanswered. Hey, because he is proving a point. You are not on his level at any way, shape, form, or fashion. Floyd did that so he get a belt and move on. But again, you have to be able to prove it. Like if I'm Stephen Fulton and I'm calling Inoue a bum, you know what I mean? I got to go out there and prove he's a bum, right? If I'm Errol Spence and I'm saying, Bud is or Wilder and Fury, if I'm telling you you're a bum, I got to go out there and prove it, because anything less than a spectacular show, right, means that this guy's not really a bum. You either got lucky in a win, or hey, you just barely eked by, or don't take a L, because then that's the worst thing that's going to happen when you've been calling your opponent a bum the whole time. I think Floyd with Gotti, to Ray's point, is he knew he had zero chance of losing that fight. So yeah, I can call him whatever the fuck I want to. But the problem with fighters nowadays is they're calling these guys bums and then losing to them.
Or have in real fights with those guys. Yeah.
Right. What was it? Munguia and who he fight last was?
Derevianchenko.
Right.
Yeah.
If you calling him a bum and he just put you through hell and high water, guess what? What does that make you?
Exactly. So this is another comment Ray left earlier saying, is Inoue on PEDs. I don't know if you've seen, there's been a lot of rumors going around about that. And I'll give my opinion in a second too. But Sean Zeitel from Fight Hype is someone who I do respect a lot. He's one of the biggest sports journalists out there. And he was just saying a few things about how Inoue has said before that he doesn't like, kind of like along the Pacquiao lines, where he's not a fan of the random drug testing and stuff like that. But so I think there's been some questions raised about that. And he's then came back and kind of not retracted a statement, but he said, all I'm saying is I'm just giving you facts. I'm not accusing him of anything or anything like that. So, and even a comment right here, which I was going to say, is that he has been VADA testing for a long, long time. So I think that if he was dirty, I think something would have came up by now. But it's something that people have talked about for a long time. So do you read anything into that? Because he has mentioned that he doesn't like the randomized testing, but I don't think any of us would really love to do. It doesn't sound great, but none of us would love to be woken up at 4 a.m. or be going through a workout and have to get blood drawn either. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, he's been clean. And until he's proven not to be clean, or there's some really suspect things going on, I can't say anything about it. But what do you think?
I don't read anything into it, bro. Like you just said, when VADA says random, that's exactly what the fuck they mean, right? They can show up anytime, any place, and you got to provide a sample, right? There's no, hey, we're going to do it between 8 and 5 Monday through Friday. No, it's, hey, I can show up to your house 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and say, pee in this cup, or hey, let me go ahead and get that blood sample. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I get it. The guy says he doesn't like that shit. Most people probably don't, but the fact that he's been with, VADA or whoever's doing the testing, right, and hasn't tested dirty, guess what? He might not like it, but he's doing it, and he's not testing dirty. You know what I mean? And it's random. So it's not like he's, with one organization that's been doing his testing the whole time, and he knows when it's coming. He's had random tests. He hasn't been dirty. So I don't think there's anything into it. Now, again, if something comes up, if you got proof that this dude is dirty, I'll listen to it all day. But until then, shut up and fight.
Yeah, this is another thing that we have, in my opinion. Thank you for tuning in, giving us some good content in the chat. But in Japan, they said Inoue got annoyed because they woke up his 2 babies. I mean, I think he does have young kids, so that's another, those are real life things that can happen at the end of the day. And I don't think what Ray's saying is too wrong either. Ray, co-host of the Boxing Shop on ITI that you guys will see every Monday morning. But when you do keep that one punch KO through these weights, it's a fair question to ask. That was the thing with Pacquiao. To me, still, I think Pacquiao went through a few more weights. So if Inoue is going to wipe out Fulton and then go to 126 and then go to 130, and then if he fights a Tank or someone like that, then I think you could start to maybe question it. But I think for right now, it's always going to be a conversation when you see a guy moving up in weight and being as explosive as he is. But I think at this point, I do have to give him the benefit of the doubt for now.
I mean, to everybody's point, right? When you got a guy who's smoking people through weight classes, right? Floyd brought this up with Pacquiao, right? He's smoking people all through these weight classes. then yeah, you should question that. But then you got to look at, Pacquiao's been tested ever since, right? Randomly, he's passed all his tests, and let's face it, he's beaten. I mean, shit, he was in what was it one time? He was in one time and beat him easy. And this was a guy who most people at the time thought was the best welterweight in the world. So, and this was one of Pacquiao's last fights. So I think sometimes motherfuckers are great, and we just got to deal with it. I think Inoue is great, and we just got to deal with it. Again, until you can prove to me that he's been dirty, kiss my ass.
Yeah. And then what do you think about this comment here? So he says he thinks 122 will be Inoue's best weight and his last one. I do wonder if it is his last weight class, because if he is able to beat Fulton, maybe he does fight Tapales, who's the other champion, to become undisputed. If he beats Fulton, I don't think he has any problems with anybody else in the whole weight class. So I do think, if depending on how and if he does beat Fulton, maybe he does go up to 126. If he does, a fight that I would love to see up there would be a fight with Robeisy Ramirez. I think that would be a real interesting fight against the Southpaw. And then you're also moving up a whole another weight class. So then I think the debate becomes, does the power carry up again? But do you think win or lose? I guess it would be more if Inoue does win. Do you see him staying at 122? Do you see him moving up to 126 or maybe a 130? Because as great as he is, I think that the power and the size would eventually catch up to him the higher you move up in weight.
I think win or lose, he goes to 126. Me personally, because that's where the money is, right? I think outside of Stephen Fulton, there might be one or two other fights you can make that'll get you a decent, pocket, some decent money. But, Inoue's 30, bro. He's been fighting for a while. You know what I mean? I think it's money time for him. I think it's, hey, let me get the biggest fights I can, especially if you fight a guy like Stephen Fulton, who's well known here, and then Inoue can start getting fights here, which is where the big money is. Let's call it what it is. You know what I mean? So I think for me, I think he is having a cup of coffee with 122. I think he either goes back or he moves up, because that's where the money fights are. No disrespect to the 122-pound division, but let's face it, right now, right, the money's at 126, possibly 130 if he can get up there. And I don't think he'll have too much of a problem if his power carries with him, because a lot of those guys are about his height. Like you said, I mean, Tank is 5'5" with his shoes on. So, you know what I mean? He can get some of these fights with some of these guys in these bigger weight classes and make some good money. But yeah, I think he's having a cup of coffee at 122. I think he moves up to 126 no matter what happens in this fight.
Yeah.
Unless there's a rematch.
Because I think the Robeisy fight is a legit thing to say. It would be in a way moving up to then his 5th weight class. But as you just alluded to, Robeisy is not some huge guy either. He's a very sharp guy and he's good at what he does, but they'd still be about the same size there too. So it's a real fight. And Inoue's at the point now where I think, especially in Japan, he could fight almost anybody and make a couple million, maybe even more than that. But if he were to fight a Robeisy Ramirez, moving up to fight another champion who was also a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, that's a kind of big fight. I think that would be huge for him. And this is not even, I don't want to get past the Fulton thing, because we talked about that. Fulton's got a big chance too. And if he's able to beat Inoue, he can then be the one who moves up. And then the rematch with Figueroa becomes even bigger. He can move up and fight a Robeisy. Does he move up and fight a Ray Vargas? Even O'Shaquie Foster at a 130. Like, there's opportunities for whoever wins this fight and whoever loses this fight. Because I don't want people to think that, oh, the winner gets to do this and the loser just kind of is just like out of the mix now. Like, this is a fight. It's not a fight to determine a great fighter. I think we already have 2 great fighters. It's to see which one is the special fighter. And then the great fighter can still, like you said, go on to have even maybe a Hall of Fame career. Nonito Donaire, we talked about being a Hall of Famer. He's not undefeated. He's got 6-7 losses on his record. It's how you bounce back from those losses and create other moments later on in your career. So I just want people to know that win, lose, or draw, I think both these guys are still great fighters and would continue to do great things even after this fight.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it a million times, on ITR, right? And no matter what show it is, losses don't mean shit if everybody you're fighting is at the top of the game, right? Nonito Donaire, no one's going to give Nonito Donaire shit for 2 losses to Inoue.
Yeah, or losing to Rigondeaux or some of those other guys and stuff too.
Exactly. There's no loss on Nonito Donaires' record where you can go, oh well, that was some bullshit. Like he's losing to the guy. You know what I mean? So it's just like we were just talking about McGee, Jeremy Pacheco, the guy he beat. All his losses are to dudes in the top, in the top of the division. He can't fight nobody else because he's beating all the, or he's taking losses to all the top guys. So when all your losses are to the guys, nobody's giving you shit for that. You know what I mean? And I think if Fulton loses or wins, I think he's definitely moving up. I think he'll have a cup of coffee with 126, but I think he goes up to 130. Eventually. Quicker maybe than obviously Inoue would. And I think Inoue, if he wins, there's some money for him at 122 still. 120, maybe one or two fights there, and then moves up to 126. But if Fulton win, lose, or draw, I think he's going, again, barring a rematch at that weight, he's moving up to 126 because there's some good money for him there. And I think I really don't think at 126 there's anybody that fucks with him. He might catch some work at 130 where there's some guys there, but I think he's moving up, if not to 126, maybe 130 eventually.
Yeah, even like I said, in my opinion, says Fulton is in kind of a win-win situation. I mean, you never want to completely say that because it depends on how you lose the Inoue fighting. Could that give you career-long damage? But I do think at the end of the day that the real boxing fans will respect him, win, lose, or draw after this fight, and he does have the Figueroa rematch or those other things. And back to this point, we touched on it before too, but hats off to both of them for taking the fight. Inoue could have easily moved up to 122 and said, okay, I want to fight a Luis Neri or someone like that to kind of get my feet wet. And Fulton could have said, okay, like I want to have the Inoue fight, but I'm going to have this rematch with because he was scheduled to have that rematch with Figueroa at 126 for like the interim WBC title. And he could have said, I want to do it, but I might not be at my best because it's been hard to make the weight. I'm moving up. So maybe we have that fight later on. And they both said, after that, we're going to make this fight right away. And I think that just speaks to both their mentalities. I think just why the sport is growing overall. And quick comment here, too. I don't know how I missed this. This was my dad, too, so I want to give him a special shout-out for tuning in. But he said he's got Fulton in a close one, enough elite skill to keep Inoue honest and pull out a squeaker. I sure hope so, honestly, at the end of the day. So I think there is a real chance for that, and I'll be rooting for that to happen without a doubt.
Shout out to Pops Kelly. Look, man, he's right. You know what I mean? Anybody who says pretty much anything about this fight is damn near right. If you think Inoue is going to win by knockout, you're probably right. If you think Fulton's going to do just what Pops Kelly just said, you're probably right. Like I think if Fulton wins, that's how he wins, right? Yes, give it to me though. Like here's the thing: give me the fight where it's here. I'm happy it's being made. I can't wait, bro.
Yeah, I mean, we're into boxing. We're not into boxing to watch these fights, and believe me, I'm still as big of a boxing junkie as anybody out there. So I'll watch all these fights so we already know the outcomes and we could say exactly how they go. But we're not in these fights to predict exactly like, oh, this fight's going to end in the 6th round and then it happens. It makes me feel good. But it's also, if I'm able to predict exactly what happens, it's not saying as much for the sport. So we get a fight like this. We get the fight that we're having Saturday with Spencer and Crawford. These are the fights that we want to see because I don't want it to be a fight that I can easily predict either. Like I said, we want these question marks and we want to have a real fight, but we don't know who's going to win and how they're going to win either.
I would be happy as shit to be wrong. So if Fulton wins, bro, thank you. Yes. I just for what I've seen, I think Inoue's got it, bro. And it's everything that everybody's saying. Yeah, I mean, if this stuff comes up later and it gets proven, Inoue's cheating or the raps or any of this shit has any weight to it, then we'll have to look at it differently. But until then, these are two of the best guys, in or around 120 some odd pounds. Period.
I think we can all attest to this comment. He had no idea who will win, rocking with Team USA, but Inoue has skills as well. I think that perfectly sums up our opinions on the fight. That Stephen Fulton, not the year. I'd assume you're probably not listening right now, but if you ever see a clip of this, just know that even if we're picking Inoue, bro, we are rooting for you all the way. And as we know, Felix is obviously pulling for his guy Fulton too. He's rocking with Fulton. So at the end of the day, we all hope that you win, and that would be a fantastic win. And even if you lose, we're not going to be those guys. We're not going to go away or anything. We're still going to support you even more than we did going into this fight, no matter what happens.
Felix, I got 2 shots on Inoue, bro.
There we go. So it looks like we got a deal. We'll see. I'm sure he will respond and say he accepts the deal, but we shall see on that. So I think we basically touched on. Is there any last comments you have on this fight? I think we've been talking about this fight for about 45 minutes. We could talk about this fight all day if we're being honest. But is there anything else that you want to talk about? I mean, we could keep on going, but I figure we'll touch on a few more things before we wrap this up.
I think that win, lose, or draw, both of these guys are going to move on and make a shitload of money. And I think that at the end of their careers, you'll be able to put both of these guys in the Hall of Fame.
Yep, and that's what it's all about. We want to see, like I said, it's not a good fighter and a good fighter fighting to see who is the great fighter. To me, we already have 2 great fighters. So we're trying to see who is the all-time special fighter, and even the loser, like we said many times, even in this live stream already, still has the path to be a great fighter and even a Hall of Famer. So going on now to the card that we have, it's going on right now. The undercard is, the main event will be George Kambosos making his comeback against Maxi Hughes. Kambosos had the big win over Teofimo, but then had the 2 performances against Devin Haney, where I thought he won maybe 2 out of 24 rounds. So are you interested at all in this comeback by George Kambosos? And what do you think about Maxi Hughes, I guess, as his comeback opponent?
No. Look, George Kambosos to me is what he is. He's the guy who got lucky against Teofimo. He caught Teofimo at probably the worst time in his career to actually be in a boxing ring. He shouldn't have been in the boxing ring. You know what I mean? He had a legitimate health concern that would have probably killed your average person. Who, you know, if Teofimo wasn't in excellent boxing shape, he wasn't a professional athlete, that condition probably would have killed him in a street fight. So, you catch a guy who's having a legitimate, emergency crisis while he's fighting you, and you barely win, right? And then you get whitewashed in your 2 defenses. Now I'll give him this. Great credit to him for taking the Devin Haney fights, because a lot of people were probably telling him, hey, go get some cash fights first. Let's cash in on these belts before we give them away. And he didn't do that. He took, he took the immediate, hey, yeah, like maybe he thought he could beat Haney. Who knows? But he got thoroughly dominated twice by the better fighter. And I really don't think that at the level that he's fighting at, the championship level, there's anybody that he can really give the business at this point. Maybe Rolly. Maybe he's got a shot to get another belt if he fights Rolly. But I don't think Kambosos has really got the goods. Maxi Hughes, I didn't really know much about him. I did, though, watch the fight against Kid Galahad. I just didn't know who he was. So there was that. And, he's got an IBO strap, most people don't regard that as, too legit, but, it's a belt. So we'll see what happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if this dude actually stops him.
Yeah, so I think it's a fight where Kambosos is a slight favorite, but I do think Maxi Hughes is very live in this fight, and I think a win would not surprise me at all. Took some losses, kind of like that average boxing guy that we always talk about in these shows and we always love. Is a guy he has 5 losses on his record, but he's won 7 in a row, and he's actually beaten some pretty solid opposition on his way back up. So to me, it comes down to, is Kambosos closer to the guy who beat Teofimo Lopez, or is it closer to the guy we saw before that fight when he fought Mickey Bay? And I thought Mickey Bay won that fight, honestly. I mean, I thought he won by a point, so it's not a robbery. I'm not claiming robbery or anything like that. Kambosos can accept that win and happily accept that win. But either way, it's either the guy who beat Teofimo or the guy who was in a toss-up fight with Mickey Bay. And I think he is still closer to that guy who was in a toss-up fight with Mickey Bay. So when we look at it, I think today I'm interested to see, first of all, just does he win this fight? Because I think Maxi Hughes is a slick guy. He's a southpaw. He's got real skills. And Kambosos is a counterpuncher. And with these counterpunchers, we see Teofimo has the same kind of things that we saw when they fight other counterpunchers or other movers and boxers is when they struggle. Kambosos struggled a bit with Lee Selby. He struggled a bit with Mickey Bay. Those guys, and obviously he struggled with Devin Haney. Those guys are all movers. They all use the jab, and they don't give you as much to hit. Now, Teofimo, on top of the fact of having the medical condition, had one of the worst game plans in the history of boxing when he came out flying, trying to knock George Kambosos out in the first round. And that gave Kambosos the perfect opportunity to catch him with the counter shot and then earn his respect for the rest of the fight. And had they had a rematch and Teofimo fought like the way he did against Josh Taylor, I don't think it goes anything like that. So I think that it's an interesting style matchup between Kambosos and Maxi Hughes. But I'm more interested to see how. So Keyshawn Davis fights in the co-main event, which we'll talk about also. But I'm more interested to see if Kambosos wins and if Keyshawn Davis wins. They're both on the same card. They're in the same weight class. So we know what that means when guys are in the same promotion. Is that a fight that happens next? Some people would say maybe it's a bit too early for Keyshawn, but Keyshawn's 24 years old. He's like the same age as Devin Haney. He's the same age as Shakur Stevenson. I would pick him to beat Kambosos, and I think that's a fight that I would love to see for him, but also for Kambosos too, because if you're Kambosos, and I would pick Keyshawn to beat him, but if you knock off Keyshawn, then you're right back to the spot where you were before, where you are a legit contender. So what do you think about Keyshawn's fight? He's fighting Francisco. I don't want to Patera, maybe is the last name. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I have some problems with this fight a bit just because I think we should be past the point with Keyshawn where I watch a lot of boxing. You watch a lot of boxing. We should be past this point of having to kind of look up his opponents. When I looked up his when I looked up his opponent, there were a few guys like he's fought Yves Ulysses, he's fought a few other guys that I'd recognize, but I don't want to be seeing Keyshawn fight these guys who I've never seen fight on TV before. So if he does win this fight, I hope he fights Kambosos. So what are your thoughts just on Keyshawn and Kambosos maybe, or Keyshawn's fight that we got coming up in a few hours?
I think you're right. You hit it right on the head. When we talked about that pre-show is there's no way you fight a guy, who's been in championship fights and then go into fighting a guy we have to look up, right? I said this about Jared Anderson and Charles Martin. You fight a guy who was a world champion. You're fighting a guy I have to look up. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be doing that. Once you make it to that level, you got to stay there, bro. You got to or advance. So that's my thoughts on that. I think he'll win this fight. I think he'll win it easily. Do I think he's ready for Kambosos? Yeah, I think Kambosos is a good fighter, not a great fighter. I think Kambosos he's got some experience that Keyshawn may not be ready for. But I think it would be a good litmus test, right? Because let's face it, let's look at the rankings. ESPN has top to bottom Devin Haney, Lomachenko, Davis, Shakur Stevenson. They got Kambosos at 5, probably just because he was unified champ. Then you got William Zepeda, Isaac Cruz, Gustavo Lemos, Jermaine Ortiz, who we're all high on here, and Frank Martin in their top 10 at the division. Of the names listed, there's maybe one guy I think he can beat or be competitive against, of those names that I've listed off. And I'm talking about Kambosos. So, and I got Keyshawn right outside that list. So I think this would be a good fight for him. Losable, but also very winnable. You know what I mean? So and then no matter what happens with Kambosos, I think Kambosos will probably win this fight, right? Get a decision. If he wins and he fights, Keyshawn next, if Keyshawn wins that fight, then that tells us everything we need to know about where he's going to go from there. Then he's ready. But if he struggles or loses, then it's like, all right, young man, get back to it. But I think he can whoop Kambosos' ass, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And Jesus brings up a solid point that Kambosos wants the big names. He doesn't want Keyshawn, who's building them up. That's fair, too, because Kambosos is sitting here saying, like, I was the former unified champion. Why am I having to fight a prospect? But people have talked about Shakur fighting Kambosos. To me, that fight does nothing for me. We already saw Devin beat Kambosos every round. Shakur would do likely the same exact thing. So I don't need to see that fight, and I think that Top Rank, you can look at it as an investment also. If you give Kambosos, maybe overpay him for the Keyshawn fight, even if you lose a little bit of money on that fight, you then build up Keyshawn and you can make money off Keyshawn going forward. So I think look at it as an investment, and I think that Top Rank's been in the game a long time. I think that's something that they could do. Jesus brought up Keyshawn versus Eduardo Ramirez, and I mean that would be a step up from the opponent we're seeing tonight. So I think any of those guys would be interesting. It's funny you brought up rankings because Ring Magazine put out their lightweight rankings. So they had Devin Haney as the Ring Magazine champion, and then they had Lomachenko, Tank, Isaac Cruz at 3, which I thought was interesting. Ryan Garcia at 4, who doesn't even fight at 135. Shakur, Frank Martin, Kambosos, William Zepeda, Maxi Hughes, and Raymond Morataya. So I then responded on Twitter and I got some feedback. A lot of people agree and some people not agreeing, but I had it as Devin Haney because he is the Ring Magazine champ, so he's automatically the champion. Then I had Tank as the number 1 contender, Shakur number 2, Loma number 3. Then I had Frank Martin, William Zepeda, Isaac Cruz, and then I had Keyshawn. Then I put Keyshawn, George Kambosos, Edwin De Los Santos, and then Morataya. But I think that Keyshawn does fit with those middle guys, a George Kambosos, a Raymond Morataya, even an Isaac Cruz. And I think those are the level of guys that we want to see him fight against. And I do think that he might have a few more fights in between, but I think that he's at the age where I think he's probably ready for those guys. So why not maybe give him a fight or two first, but I think he'd be ready for him right now.
I think Keyshawn's got the talent, bro. Like when you just look at natural talent, Keyshawn should be fighting bigger fights right now. And, you know, I hear people talking about, you know, Kambosos wants big money and big names. Well, Maxi Hughes is neither one of those guys, you know, and let's face it. If you know, if you put who's a better opponent, Maxi Hughes or Keyshawn, give me Keyshawn every day of the week, twice on Sunday. You know what I mean? So, yeah, he might want big names, but let's face it. You got one big name, you got lucky, and then you got your ass whooped twice. You know, prove something against somebody who we all expect big things from. That would, if I was in Kambosos' corner, right? I'm telling him, hey, they got this Keyshawn kid. You know, he's green as shit, but everybody thinks he's the next best thing. Go out here and whoop his ass if you think you're you know, your biggest thing. Because what would be bigger for him, right? You get in there, you beat up on a guy most people think should whitewash your ass. Hey, I told you I'm the dude. Then then you can use that as a springboard to get into those bigger fights, right? Now, of course, the risk is that Keyshawn comes in there and whomps your ass, which I think he would. But if you're Kambosos and you think you're that guy, why not take it? You know, to say, hey, well, okay, well, this is food for me. I'm gonna give me a nice little payday, and then all right, who else wants it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, we got Jesus M playing a little matchmaker. I do like some of these matchups. He says the first, no way, Top Rank overpays Kambosos to fight Keyshawn. I think it depends. I think if it's a co-main event, I think it is very unlikely, but they do want Keyshawn to become a main event fighter. So if you do see it as a main event, I think they could make a deal that Kambosos finds worth it. He says Oscar Duarte versus Keyshawn, Jeremiah Nakatia versus Keyshawn. That's a fight I'd really love. But I would probably still like it, but we did see Nakatia get stopped by Morataya in his last fight in 2 rounds. So maybe someone a half step up from that. But I do think that would be an interesting fight. And this is the fight that I've been calling for this fight for a long time. Jermaine Ortiz and Keyshawn. I think that's a great fight. I'd even like to see Jermaine Ortiz versus Kambosos. Too. The one caveat with that is Jermaine Ortiz was pulled off a top rank card because he wasn't able to make 135. So it looks like he's going up to 140. But if he's able to get a different nutritionist or something and change his lifestyle and maybe make 135 again, I would love those fights. But I guess we got to see what direction Jermaine Ortiz's career goes in first.
Here's a name, bro. He's been calling for, you know, these big money fights and all that, you know, because of, you know, what he did in a loss. But here's a respectable name, Pitbull Cruz, bro. He's man. Put Keyshawn in with a guy like that. You know,
and I think Felix had been when Felix was up in Vegas. When he saw Keyshawn, it was actually Keyshawn was with Pitbull Cruz. They were all there, so they were talking about it. And that's a fight I'd like to see too. I think that might be a little ways away because it's the combination of I think Top Rank might want to, even if we think he's ready for that fight. They might want to wait until they know he's definitely the favorite. And I think if you're Cruz's team, they're sitting there. Same thing we were saying about Kambosos, where they might be saying, oh, is it really worth the risk reward? And they're still waiting on that second Tank payday, I think, too. That's why he hasn't fought anybody great recently. So I think you got to kind of factor those things in. But shoot, stylistic wise, too, that's a fight that I would love. Jesus also said Kambosos is expected to win versus Hughes. It's a show fight for Kambosos. Hughes is on a good winning streak. Kambosos is expected to win, but I think it's a very dangerous comeback fight. Anytime you have a comeback fight, I think you want to have a fight that and Felix says right here, Keyshawn confirmed that he would like to fight Pitbull. It's a fight I'd love to see. I think both sides might want to wait a little bit, but I mean, shit, if they were to make this fight right now, I wouldn't be mad, and that's without a doubt. But
I think that's a more dangerous fight than the Kambosos fight for Keyshawn because
100%.
Nobody looks good against Isak. You know, I mean, and he's not gonna, you know, he's gonna be in your chest the whole whole fight too.
Yeah, he's never
right?
dealt with anything like that kind of pressure before either. Even if it is kind
Right.
of basic at times, he's never dealt with anyone with that kind of pressure for sure.
Yeah, you're going to have a much easier job keeping Kambosos at range than you are Pitbull Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think that's a much better. I think Kambosos is a much better fight for Keyshawn stylistically than Cruz would be. But if Keyshawn and Cruz sign up to fight each other, bro, sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a fuck where
Hell
they
yeah.
fight. They can have that fight in my backyard. You understand? Like I don't care where it is. Sign me up. I'm watching that.
Yeah. Speaking about where they're having the fights, there's two not problems, but two interesting things about this card. One thing is what Jesus was saying, that it's an expected win. It's supposed to be a showcase fight for Kambosos. Kambosos is a counter puncher, so a counter puncher who doesn't look good against slick boxers who have good jabs. So what do you do in a showcase fight? You put him against a guy who doesn't hit hard, a slick boxer who like. But then also you have Kambosos is from Australia. Maxi Hughes is from the UK. How the hell does this fight end up in Oklahoma? Like,
fuck it, bro.
Honestly, I mean, I know Top Rank has a connection to Oklahoma. I think it's at a casino, so they got a site fee for it. But that's crazy to me. I mean, I hope both guys are clearly getting paid for it. They're not coming over for no reason. But when I had first seen that it was being announced, Keyshawn's from Norfolk, Virginia. There's absolutely no connection to Oklahoma. So I found that strange as well, honestly.
I mean, to be honest with you, Oklahoma's got what? The Thunder, the Sooners, and casinos. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, and casinos are probably more prominent than the other two. I don't know, man. Like, how you get two guys from over across the pond to come over here and fight in Oklahoma, of all places. You know what I mean? But that also goes to show you, how big Kambosos is not. Right, like you're coming from across the pond, you can't even get the Garden. You can't, the small arena. You can't, you're not fighting in Miami. You're not fighting in Atlanta. You're not even fighting in Vegas. They got you can get a fight at any casino in Vegas. You're not even in Vegas, bro. You're in Oklahoma. Come on, man.
And Jesus is saying, where should it be? And I guess I'm more questioning how it ended up in Oklahoma. Not really. I don't have as many because I guess it's easy to say, oh, you could put it in Australia. You could put it in the UK. But Top Rank is based over here. I guess they're trying to appeal Kambosos to the American fan base. Maybe you could have had it in a Turning Stone in upstate New York, which isn't the Hulu Theater, but Kambosos already fought in New York. Do you have it in Florida or a place like that where they have some casinos down there? I don't really have an answer for you, Jesus. That's a fair question, but I guess I was more just caught off guard that the fight was in Oklahoma just because there's no ties to Oklahoma for anybody on the main card.
I think this is actually a fight that would have been bigger business in the UK. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, both of these guys are more well known over there. Mm-hmm. You saw how many people showed up for Kambosos, and when he put on his show at home, right? People know these guys there, right? And they probably know Maxi Hughes a lot better, in Australia, or vice versa. They know Kambosos more in the UK than they do here. So I think it probably, you're right. I mean, yeah, they get a site fee. Maybe they're trying to introduce this guy, into the US fans, but I think like as far as ticket sales and popularity, this definitely could have probably done way better numbers over in the UK or in Australia.
Yeah. And I guess the UK probably could have been the most profitable spot for that. I think the problem is that they view Kambosos as the A side, and they probably don't want to bring him over there because then Maxi Hughes would have the hometown advantage because not that they're picking sides, but if they are kind of picking sides. They promote Kambosos, but if it's a close fight, clearly they would want Kambosos to win. Kambosos is the former unified champion, and they'd want to. It's easier to sell Kambosos against the Shakur, which even though I don't want to see that fight, or Kambosos against the Keyshawn, or Kambosos against these other guys, than it is a Maxi Hughes. So I think at the end of the day, part of that is just they want to keep Kambosos, just have him have an advantage. But it is weird, I guess, why it's in Oklahoma and not in Australia. And for that, I don't have a good reason, honestly.
Who gives a shit? Kambosos sucks. Exactly. That's my, I don't know. He hasn't done anything really that I've been impressed with. Yes, he got the win against Teofimo, but again, now that we know why he got that win against Teofimo, it's like he should have an asterisk next to his win against Teofimo Lopez. You know what I mean? And it's just like, okay, bro. Now, granted, Teofimo took the fight. Kambosos is not his fault. That Tio took the fight and got in there. But now that I know why you won, again, all right.
Yeah, and
Next.
for all you Australians and you Kambosos fans, I don't want you coming in my guy Nibs' DMs over this. At the end of the day, if he beats Maxi Hughes and he goes out and beats somebody else, then we will take back our words. But at the end of the day, I'm in agreement with him where I think that he's closer to a fringe contender than he is a champion level guy. And even Jesus says Kambosos comes to fight. I don't think any of us can doubt that he does come to fight. We're not doubting his warrior spirit, anything like that. We've even given him praise for taking the Haney fights when he could have fought other guys. But like Jesus said, he doesn't make many adjustments. And unless a guy is right in front of him, giving him exactly what he wants, it's tough for him to kind of improvise on the fly with these great fighters. Such a part of the reason why this Inoue Fulton fight is so great, because we know both guys have a great plan A, but they can also go to a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. They can improvise. All these great fighters are able to improvise on the fly. Spence and Crawford will be, when we talk about that fight next week, we'll talk about that also. But Kambosos just, it's a bit lacking with that. Where when he's doing his thing, he's able to do a good against the guy who's allowing him to do all these things, but he's not able to kind of make somebody else fight his fight when they want to fight a different fight.
If Kambosos fought this version of Tio, the one that just beat Taylor, right? It's over in 4 rounds.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say he does not make it 12 for sure. Yeah,
it's over in 4. It's not close. You know what I mean? If he fights a completely 100% healthy Tio, if Tio was healthy in their first fight, we wouldn't even be talking. Nobody would know. Still wouldn't know who this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's it's like he's riding the fact that he got lucky. You know what I mean? Like, what have you done since then that proves you deserve any of the praise that you're putting upon yourself? Nothing. I could see if he was competitive in the Haney fights. Like Lomachenko, a lot of people thought he won the fight with Devin Haney, right? It was a very competitive fight. So I'm not saying, anybody got robbed. I thought Lomachenko won too. But I can't be mad at people who thought Devin Haney won, right? So there's a controversy at least there, right, to be had if you really want to get into it. There's no controversy with Devin Haney and Kambosos. The only controversy was, why are we watching this a second time? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, why do we need to see this again? And it was almost a repeat exactly of the first one.
It was even worse the second fight too, because Devin started to step it up and really put it on him too.
Yeah, so it's like, look, bro, you can't come to anyone and say, well, I fought the best guy and barely lost. No, you fought the best guy and got your ass whipped.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And let's face it, if you fought any of the other top guys, it'd be bad business for you. Yeah. If Kambosos got to fight against like a tank for some reason, right? That would be murder. Mm-hmm. They might put Tank back in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly though, I mean, everything you said I agree with. So we'll give you guys, we're going to be kind of wrapping up soon. Another Top Rank main card is going to be starting in a little bit. But so Jesus or anyone else, if you guys have any final questions, you could drop them down low. He did ask about Giovanni Santillan. So I know he is fighting, I think, pretty soon in the Top Rank undercard. He's a 30-0 welterweight. He's been kind of hanging out in the wings for a little bit. He had a close fight with Antonio DeMarco, I think. What was that? During the bubble, maybe it was, I think. And since then he's fought a few decent guys, but he's kind of just been waiting for a big fight. He's fighting Eric Bonet, who's 27-6, and Bonet is one of those guys who's a solid guy too. He lost a majority decision to Sergey Limpanets before. He's got some decent wins on his resume too. So this is one of those sneaky fights where I think Santillan should win, but it's a fight that could be tougher than a lot of people anticipate. And I think that if he wins this fight, the one fight that I could see Gio getting is if Josh Taylor does move up to 147. I think that could be his first fight at welterweight. There's a lot of sharks in the water at 147, so Taylor's not going to jump in and fight a Boots or someone like that. So perfect timing, Jesus, to answer your question. I guess if Josh Taylor is moving up to 147, I think that's a fight that I would love to see him in. But I guess we got to see how he looks in this fight. I do expect him to beat Eric Bonet, but not a foregone conclusion either. I do think he is live and closer than the odds suggest of him in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see him step up. Step up his level of competition, bro. Like, I mean, I don't think he's fighting anybody that's really giving anybody at the top of the division, hey, I got to fight this guy. You know what I mean? So I'd like to see him step up his competition. He might be food for Rolly, maybe. Get in there and Rolly's team would think he would be. Maybe they give that guy shot because he's not getting anybody else. Other than that, yeah, no, I think he's doing good work. I want to see him against somebody, real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before I really start throwing him out there as the next thing.
Yeah, and Jesus, sorry to let you know, but you said if Milton and Shaw win, then fight each other. The winner gets Jared Anderson. I wouldn't be upset with that, but Stephen Shaw got stopped earlier today. He took a big upset, so unfortunately that ruins those plans. But I am excited to see Jeremiah Milton on this undercard. I think he's one of those guys that as long as he keeps his keeps progressing up, I think we will see him in a big fight eventually. But if you're a Stephen Shaw fan, tonight's not really the night for you because he already took a tough L earlier today. So kind of a shocking loss too. I think that it was a comeback fight where he was supposed to look good in coming off the FA fight. But anytime I think you go from a main event spot to then be in the first fight of the undercard, it shows that the promotion is kind of not over you, but they're not as high on you as they once were. And I think clearly after this fight, it could be the end of the road at Top Rank for Stephen Shaw. But Jesus, quick question for you. Quick question for Jesus, real quick. Are you watching the Troy Isley fight? I know that it just finished. Just do you have any insight on how that fight went at all, if you're still tuned in? Because I was kind of peeking a little bit, but I haven't seen too much of that. So if you have any answers on that, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think for Stephen Shaw, I think it's a wrap, bro. I think it's time to hang it up, call it a career, or not call it a career necessarily, but he either needs to get somebody else in his camp, take him back to the drawing board, and either show him some shit, or he's just pretty much going to be, that he's going to be that guy that you call up when you need an easy dub in the heavyweight division. He's just going to be an opponent at this point.
Yeah, that's what I think he is. I think he will be an opponent guy. I think he'll go back to the regional New York show, the Broadway boxing circuit they have over there. Probably get a few more fights on there and kind of linger around waiting for a shot. But so Jesus, I know you said you don't have ESPN, but I do know that Top Rank on Twitter, and I think probably on Instagram too, they did post the Shaw fight. So if you want to check that out, or even the stoppage in that fight, that is up there. So I think you can check that out on there. But Jeremiah Milton against El Gigante, that's Antonio Morales, I think you're talking about, the guy who's trained by Robert Garcia. I mean, shit, I'd love that fight. I think Milton against any of those other rising heavyweights, I'd like to see, and I'm interested to see. That's why we're going to kind of wrap this show up pretty soon. Yep, Morales is who he's talking about, a Robert Garcia guy, because I do want to see Jeremiah Milton in this fight too. So have you seen Jeremiah Milton before, Nibs? He's a heavyweight. He's fought on a few cards. Not a huge name yet, but he is the guy I'm keeping my eye on for sure.
I've seen one of his fights, and he's a guy who's interesting, right? Like to be honest with you, I would have had a better time watching Jared Anderson fight him than the guy he's fighting now. I don't even know the guy's name. I'd have to look it up again. But I think Milton he might not be ready for Jared Anderson, but he's another one of those guys, right? You've got to pay attention to what he's doing, and I think if moved right, you know what I mean, he could be right in the mix with a Jared Anderson in a year or two. Depending on how they move him along. Sometimes though you see these guys with decent records and they're just not it. I think Milton is got the goods, bro. I think he's legit.
Yeah. So good thing is my dad has the answer. Isley won unanimous decision, 7-1 on all three cards. I figured it would go something along those lines, but that's good to know. So last thing too is Jesus said Bakhtimir Jalilov versus Milton or Shaw. Jalilov is the Olympic gold medalist who beat Richard Torres. He beat Frazier Clark, I think, also too. But Olympic gold medalist, he's a big, tall Uzbek, a southpaw that Top Rank just signed. So I think those guys, I think, are all realistic matchups. They're all around the same record, 9-0, 10-0, or Shaw is a little further on in his career, but doesn't have the ceiling maybe. So I think that those are all fights I'd like to see. And yes, it is on. If you go to Top Rank's Twitter, let me pull it up right now to make sure. They do have, because Shaw was dropped in the fight. And then, so I think they at least have that on there. I don't know if they have the stoppage, which came shortly after that. We were on the live as it happened, so I didn't see it happen per se, but it should be on there right now. I'm looking to see if I can find it. Yeah, and it is on. If you go to Top Rank's Top Rank's Twitter, you got to go back a little bit, but just over an hour ago, they did post on that, so you can check that out, Jesus. But I think we basically touched on almost everything. I mean, is there anything? We'll see if there's any other final questions. But is there anything else that you wanted to just quickly mention before we wrap this up and enjoy the boxing that we got tonight?
Nah, man. Other than quickly, I just thought it'd be interesting to touch on the Alycia Baumgardner situation. I know they're looking at what her next, dancing partner is going to be, and I know a lot of people want to see the Michaela Mayer rematch. I'm not one of those people. I know I'm in the minority. I don't need to see the rematch. I thought Baumgardner won clearly enough in the first one, in my own opinion, to where a rematch is not really needed. But I understand it makes money. It makes sense, right? I'm no fool, and I would watch it again because it was a good first fight. Don't get me wrong, but I think in her division, Pursoon is probably the best in her division that she hasn't fought yet. But I would love to see her and Serrano. Her and Serrano would be, to me, one of the best fights. And, Serrano could pretty much fight anybody at any weight class the way she jumps up and down. But I would love to see that. It would be a great fight because Baumgartner's undisputed. Serrano could probably pick up some belts while she's waiting for Katie Taylor to get back on her shit so they can run it back. But other than that, man, I think, just waiting on the big ones. You know what I mean? Just waiting on this next week of boxing. We're going to have a lot to talk about next week.
For sure. And I do think that Alycia, good performance by her. She was able to avenge the only loss of her career, so she kind of can finally put that behind her. That even with the big wins, I do think that had always kind of been in the back of her mind, knowing that girl had won that fight, so it was big for her to get that win. For me, I think if I had a choice, I would pick the Serrano fight. I think that's an awesome fight. It's another one of those undisputed versus undisputed fights. And the good thing about women's boxing, we have all these undisputed champions. 126, Serrano's undisputed. 130, Alycia is undisputed. 135, Katie Taylor's undisputed. 140, Chantel Cameron's undisputed. Then we have Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall higher up in weights, but basically for those women from 126 to 140, all four of them are undisputed champions. So if you match them up in any way you want to, I'm down for any of those fights. I do think that, for me, I think Serrano and Alycia would be a fantastic style matchup, and it would be a great fight. So I think, as Jesus said, they can't start marinating fights. They just got to fight continuously. And I think that's what they will do. I think that they realize, especially Serrano and Katie Taylor, they're in their mid-30s now, so they know that they don't have as much time as those other ones. So I think we will continue to see them get these big fights. And then he said, did we see Robles versus McGregor? I know that was a fight yesterday in the UK. Lee McGregor, he's talking about. I did see he was upset. I did not watch the fight, but I did see highlights after the fact. So I do know that was a pretty big upset. Lee McGregor's not a huge name, but I was surprised to see him lose that fight.
I didn't watch it. Yeah, I'll be honest. So I would probably watch it, later on YouTube, but I didn't watch it live. But thanks for ruining it for me. No, but you know what? I think McGregor is a novelty. I think he's even a novelty in his own sport at this point. You know what I mean? He hasn't. I don't even. So we'll see. But it makes money again, so it makes sense. To your point, yeah, I think. To his point, yeah, women do have to fight more often than guys, and they do have to fight each other more often, right? Like you're not going to see a lot of, O's in women's boxing because they're fighting. The top fighters have to fight each other, whether they like it or not, to make money. But they're doing it. You know what I mean? Nobody's running. Everybody's saying, "Okay, let's get this smoke," and that's why you see fighters like Serrano, who's ranked in the top 5 in 3 weight divisions. You know what I mean? She and legitimately to boot. Like it's not like this is just they're giving it to her because she's got some belts, bro. I know I was joking. I knew it was, but I was giving you shit. But I think that the Serrano thing is she can fight at so many different levels, and that's beautiful for her because she can make so much money. You don't see that as much in guys boxing because they don't have to, right? And I think he's right on the head on that. And yes, I knew McGregor wasn't the UFC McGregor. I know the difference, but I will watch that fight later on.
Yep. So I figured you knew that too. I threw that up there just in case. But I knew exactly what you were talking about either way. So the last thing I guess we'll touch on quickly is that Andy Cruz did make it, as we mentioned, the Baumgardner card. Andy Cruz made his pro debut. He fought Juan Carlos Burgos, which is not your average pro debut to fight either. He fought a guy who's fought for world titles multiple times. He just fought Keyshawn last year, too, and he won every single round. I know some people were kind of, I think with the Andy Cruz, people have to realize that he's been an amateur for so long with the Cuban style that even though he's training with Bozianis and Boots, which I think is a great pairing, it's going to take time for him to have the pro style. He's not going to come in right away and be turning over his punches like a Keyshawn or these other guys. So I think anyone who was expecting him to go in there and steamroll Burgos and stop him within a few rounds was setting unfair expectations. A guy, Burgos, who's never been dropped, never mind stopped before, fighting someone who's fought as an amateur his whole career. I think that we've all figured it would go to a decision, so it was good to see. But like he said, Andy is light on his feet and he doesn't torque his lower body. And I think for right now, he doesn't. I think it'll come with time. I was impressed with some of the things that he was able to do. I think that he's fighting in a more defensively responsible posture now as a pro with both Sienna. So I'll be interested to see. It's a process with him. Like I said, it won't happen overnight, but I do think by the time he's maybe 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, we'll be able to see him ready to contend with some of those top guys. But it will take some time.
Bro, I mean, look at it like this, bro. He's 27. You know what I mean? And I think there's a difference when you take these Cuban guys, especially the Cuban boxers. I mean, these guys are, pros for years before they become, actual pros. You know what I mean? So, you look at the Rigondeaux, you look at, all these guys, there's a laundry list of Cuban fighters who come in and they're fighting right away at the highest level. Why is that? Because they've already been doing it. You know what I'm saying? And, I hate to say it, but Cuba breeds boxers and baseball players. Like these dudes, are raised from a very young age to do this sport and do it professionally. They just so happen to also have a very good amateur, style and background. But now you see them switching up a little bit where they get into the pros and they're doing work. It's ridiculous to come in and fight a guy who's 35-8 as your pro debut and a guy who's been in championship fights. And it was easy work. It wasn't like, he had a hard time with him. So, I think you're right. I don't think he's going to have a huge knockout record, but I think he's going to be putting on some shows.
Yeah, but he's one of those guys that even for all his, what people call deficiencies, it's going to make him hard as hell to beat too. Like all these things, he doesn't turn his punches over, but it also means he's not overextending. He's not putting himself in these bad positions. So I do think it will take time. If he were to fight those top guys right now, I don't think it goes well for him at all. But I think you give him a few fights, I think it will be interesting to see. And Jesus is saying, is Burgos the same guy that he was in his prime? No, but I do think if you still compare Andy Cruz to how, for example, Verbesi Ramirez, who also fights on the Fulton Inoue card in the co-main event, is someone who I think is the best featherweight in the world. We think of him as a great fighter right now. He lost his pro debut to a guy who was 4-2-2. So it just shows that Andy Cruz is fighting somebody way more experienced, and he won every single round against him. So I think that the book isn't out on him yet. I remember once upon a time when I was getting into boxing, it's way different, but people were saying with Shakur Stevenson that, oh, he has the amateur style. He doesn't turn on his punches. We're saying he's a completely different fighter now also. So Andy Cruz is older. It's going to be harder to kind of revert some of those muscle memory things, but I do think being with Bozianis and being with Boots and being in that Philadelphia pro style gym will help him out immensely too.
It just shows you that he's ready. I mean, Burgos could get in there with some contenders right now and give him some work. He might not beat him, but he's going to give him. There's some guys that we have in high regard would have a rough time with Burgos right now. You know what I mean? So it just lets you know the dude is ready. He might not be, a world beater. I mean, he'd be food for anybody in the top 10 right now. Let's like you just said, let's keep it clear. But it just shows you he's ready to be a pro. He's ready to be in there, and he's going to be ready to ramp up fast. It's not going to take him 10 years. You know what I mean? He's not going to be 37 fighting for his first title fight. Within the next 3 to 4 years, probably, if not sooner, this guy's going to be fighting for a strap.
Yeah, but one last thing that I'll say on this, it impressed me too, is that he's been fighting 3-round fights for his whole career. 3 3-minute rounds, even maybe 4 3-minute rounds or 3 2-minute rounds, short fights. He was able to go 10 hard rounds, and I never really saw the gas tank be an issue or anything like that. So even if it was a bit in the first fight, it's something that they could work on. But the fact that he was able to go 10 rounds was really impressive for me too, just because he'd never fought more than 4 rounds before. So I think to be able to go 10 3-minute rounds was impressive also, because you don't see that in a pro debut besides the Lomachenko.
And he needed it. Like, let's face it, what was the best outcome for him in a fight, in his pro debut? He gets 10 rounds against a world-class fighter. That's wonderful tape. You know what I mean? Hey, we get to go back and build off of beating the Burgos over 10 rounds. You know what I mean? If he had gone in there and stopped Burgos in 1 or 2 rounds, right? What do you get out of that? Nothing really, except for an impressive win. But now you get a good win on your first, on your ledger, and you get something to build from, because, like you said, you didn't really have a lot to build on rounds wise. Now we know our guy can go 10, and he go again 10 against a world class dude. Now we need to, let's build from there. So I think the world of Andy Cruz. I think, again, it all depends. I hope they don't move him too fast. Like, hey, let's fight for a world title next. Nah, you're not ready for that. But 2-3 years, 4 years tops, I think he'd be in there fighting for a strap.
Yeah, you brought up a great point. It was something I was gonna say too. But if he had fought one of those, let's say if he fought a guy who was, and no disrespect, because any fighter who has a pro record is a pro, but if he had fought somebody who was 5-12 or something like that and knocked him out in the first round, fought 5 of those guys right away, he could have been 5-0 with 5 knockouts in 5 weeks. He would have learned. He learned way more, which we always talk about. You learn way more in those rounds that you go against higher opposition than you do in any knockout. We talk about it all the time. So I do think that knockouts would have been cool. That maybe would have gotten more clicks on social media. It would have got more casual fans talking about them. But at the end of the day, I think all the hardcore fans know that this outcome was, I think, the best thing that he could have looked for in his pro debut. Because we're still talking about, we're literally talking about a pro debut a guy made too, and the fact that we're even talking about it on this show.
Right.
So think about it.
Look at Jared Anderson, bro. Look at what he learned more in the Charles Martin fight, or should be able to learn more from the Charles Martin fight
than any other fight.
Period. If you put all his other fights together, you know what I mean? He can learn more from that one fight than he did all of the other ones put together. So when you get in there against a real dude who's going to give you rounds and not just follow the assignment, oh, hey, let me go down and stay down as soon as you touch me. Like, he put Charles Martin down, and for the first time, this dude got back up and then hurt you, and he was right, and he was competitive in every round you were in. Whether you were winning them or not, Charles Martin was there. You learn way more with that than you do, fighting. I don't even know what the guy's the light-skinned dude he fought before that, who was just trash. You smoke him in 2-3 rounds, you don't learn shit. You know what I mean? Because this guy's not giving you anything back. Cruz is going to learn a lot from that fight. And if he gets another fight similar to this, again, I think not necessarily the knockouts is what's going to give you the best experience going forward. It's going to be learning because you got to learn on the job. Let's call it what it is. You look at Lomachenko. He was fighting Orlando Salido in his second fight, I think it was, for a world title. Bananas. You know what I mean? He had no business.
And then Gary Russell in his third fight, which is the craziest part too. He fought Gary Russell right after that, which is, I think, his best win of his career.
Yeah. I mean, he beats Gary Russell, which is crazy when you look at who Gary Russell has become since then, right? But you're in there against one of the most hard-nosed fighters in Orlando Salido in your division. Damn near pulled it out, But the fact that it's like, hey, maybe we should have pumped the brakes a little bit. We're talking about Lomachenko. This guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. So, I don't think they should be going that fast, but, we'll be looking at a world title fight for him soon enough.
Yeah. And like you just said, Lomachenko, if Lomachenko was 1-0 when he fought Salido. If he was 4-0 when he fights Salido, he knocks him out or wins every single second of every round. So I think what we're saying is that just take your time. I think, like, we do want to see him. We don't want to see him become 15-0 before we see a world title fight, anything like that. But don't throw him in there right now. Give him, I'm even saying, maybe is it 5-6 fights before we see him against a real contender type guy. It's not going to have to be right away, but we also don't want to see. So find that in between where don't rush him into a fight, but don't slow play it either. And I think they'll do a good job with him. So Jesus said Cruz versus Abdullah Mason. I think that's a fight you could see eventually. I know Abdullah, I think he's 19 years old right now, and he hasn't really fought anybody. He's fought guys with good records, but the context behind some of those guys, they've been off for a while. They were moving up in weight. So Charlie Sheehy, another one. So down the line, I think those are great fights we could see. Mercado is a fight that those. So Jesus M's got his matchmaking on hat today. He's giving us some solid matchups. Mercado fights another solid one too. I think that's a sooner one for Andy Cruz that we could see. So Jesus, I like what we like to matchmake on this show a lot too. So I think that your matchmaking is kind of fitting good with us on this one for sure.
I'm trying to tell you, we need to get an ITR belt. Get some of these dudes in here and fight on RTI cards. Get Felix on that.
Yeah, nah, for sure. We can get him on that. If he's not listening, we'll get him on that for sure. But last thing I want to talk about, just because we do have some people in the building, we'll briefly touch on it, but just the Showtime card from last week. So we saw Frank Martin get a unanimous decision win over Artem Haratunian. Elvis Rodriguez got an impressive win over Victor Postol. I know Postol is far past his best days, but it was still a big win for me to see Elvis get after. Elvis lost to Kenny Sims, was cut by Top Rank, but he's now making some noise over on Showtime and PBC. Freddie Rojas fought in the first fight. He got a TKO win over Diego Sanchez. I've never really seen Sanchez before. Freddie Rojas, I know, was a sparring partner of Terrence Crawford's for the Spence fight, so not much input on that fight, but I did want to just mention it. But the big fight, I think, clearly was the Frank Martin fight, and our scorecards were kind of along the same lines. We thought Martin was losing the fight. I think by rounds 8 or 9, we had Haratunian up a bit. But Frank Martin, to me, I was still impressed by the way he was able to close the show. And I thought that he did what he had to do to pull it out at the end of the day. So is it a dynamite performance like he had against Michel Rivera? No, but he also showed in the first time that he was able to deal with the adversity. And there were a lot of guys who would have found a way to lose that fight. And I think the combination of Frank digging deep and Derek James also. Derek James didn't bullshit him either. He said a lot of guys we've seen in these fights say, hey, you're doing a good job. You might be winning a close fight. And Derek James was basically like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're losing this fight. You got to step up right now. And Frank did exactly that. So what were your thoughts on how Frank Martin dealt with, I guess, the first adversity he's ever dealt with in his pro career?
It's pretty much an echo of what you said, bro. Like, look, again, it's the best thing that could have happened to him at this particular point, right? And hats off to his opponent. A lot of people don't know this, but, he's fighting a guy who's, in the Olympics. You get, what, a bronze medal?
Yeah, a medalist in the Olympics.
So, and I don't want people shitting on any medal you get if you get any medal from the Olympics, you're the shit as far as I'm concerned. So, you were talking about an Olympic bronze medalist. This guy comes in and he's not just going to fold. He gave, Martin exactly what he needed. He gave him some work and damn near beat him. Me personally, I feel it on the way I was scoring it. If Martin hadn't gotten that knockdown, you know what I mean? I think he loses that fight, in my opinion. But I do like the fact that he turned it on, because a lot of times we do see these prospects who either might actually think they're winning the fight or are defeated already before the fight is over. And they just kind of like, hey, well, let me get out of here and live to fight another day kind of shit. Nah, Frank Martin turned it on and did what he had to do, got his dub. And again, it'll be valuable tape. He'll be able to learn from it and go forward. It's a much better situation than if he had smoked this dude again in the first round. He got some good work, and he finally got to somebody who took him into some deep waters, and he didn't drown. So there's that.
Yeah, but it shows the saying styles make fights too, where Michel Rivera was somebody who was actually favored to beat Frank Martin. But we saw Frank Martin steamroll him, and he won almost basically every second of the fight, and was one of the best performances I thought of all last year. And then he comes in here against Haratunian, a guy who I don't think he was, we talked about it before, but I didn't think he was given enough credit going into the Frank Martin fight either. A lot of people saw, Frank Martin against a guy I don't know, he'll smoke this guy. And we saw that clearly it didn't go that way. So it was good to see Frank at least deal with a bit of adversity. Now I am interested to see where he goes next. So Jesus is saying that Frank wants the big money fights before he loses, and the network no longer wants him. I think he does want the big money fights. I think that he's the kind of guy that if he gets a couple losses, I don't think it would be the end of the world, depending on who they're against. He is 28, but he is more. He even when he was 26, 27, I did view him still as more of a prospect. I think he's clearly a legit contender now after the Rivera fight. But he's someone who got into boxing, I think, in his early 20s. So he had some big amateur wins against Virgil Ortiz and some other guys, but he is still raw. Even when you see him in there are sometimes he said he sees things he could do, but he's just not able to pull the trigger. So I think that'll come with the more experience you get. A fight like this, he saw early on, he wasn't able to pull the trigger, and then he was able to make the adjustments later on in the fight. So I think that will serve him well going forward without a doubt. Jesus also said Frank versus Edwin De Los Santos, who we saw recently too. That would be a great fight. I think either Frank versus Isaac Cruz or Frank versus Edwin De Los Santos are the two fights that I would love to see for him next.
I mean, if I was Frank, I'd want big money fights too after that fight, because you damn near lost. You know what I'm saying? You want, I mean, that's the whole point. This is called prize fighting. You're not in there for free. So, you want to get in there and get the big money fights. So, when it is time to hang it up, or you do take some L's and maybe your, money generating ability isn't as big as it once was, you've set yourself up, right? So shit, yeah, of course he wants to. Is he ready for the big money fights? Probably not. But fuck it, put him in there. I mean, he's got enough talent, and again, he's proven that he can close out, right? He didn't just whoop and go away or rest on his laurels thinking, "Oh, I've got it in the bag, let me cruise," and then he actually loses the fight. So I like what I see in him. He's got some dog in him. So I wouldn't be against him fighting pretty much anybody. Is he ready for Isaac Cruz? Give it to me. Like, you know what I mean? Let me see.
I would pick Frank to win that fight, honestly. But it's a good competitive fight. I think the styles would mesh because we saw Frank have some troubles with the volume and just the activity of Haratuni when he was waiting to pick the perfect shot. And against an Isaac Cruz, even if the perfect shots would be there at times, you can't wait for the absolute perfect shot and let Cruz get 10, 15 punches off either. So I think it's a perfect clash of styles. And that's a fight where I think Frank could either not look great, or that's the kind of side where he could look at his best. If he is catching and countering, as like the name of the show, if he's able to catch and counter Isaac Cruz, I think it could make for a great performance also that he could have.
I see what you did there. That was smooth.
That one, yeah.
Everybody, Jack Kelly, he's here. Yeah, I mean, he's not ready for Shakur. He's not ready for Tank. He's not ready for those guys yet. You know what I mean? But shit, give me a Cruz fight. Why not? I'd take that shit. A Jermaine Ortiz kind of fight. Give me those kind of guys against him. I'd love to see it. I think you're right. I think he does beat those guys. Looking good against Isaac Cruz isn't going to happen, unless you can get him out of there early, which, he's got a hard head. He can take a hell of a punch. So we'll see. But I think now is the time where, hey, he does need to get those bigger fights to see what he's really made of. Let's get him some bigger names before maybe he does catch a L against another guy like this. But, I'm not worried about Frank Martin. I think Frank Martin is going to be just fine. But I would like to see him against some of the top guys.
Yeah, like Jesus says, I think he is 27 now, or 28. So this is the time where you do want to get those big paydays. So he does want to capitalize. And like you said, I think he'll be okay. And anytime a guy's with Derek James, he's got a good guy in his corner. So let's be real. They'll be able to maximize his potential to the absolute fullest too. So I think there's no worries about, is he going to maximize his abilities? It's just, are his abilities, when they're maximized, going to be enough to beat the top guys? I think that's to be determined. Jesus said here, so Jesus, I want to see if you like my matchmaker half for this one. So Elvis Rodriguez. I think there's a few guys I'd want to see him with. One would be Batir Akhmedov, the guy who we just saw lose a close fight to Kenny Sims. Akhmedov's got 3 losses, but they've been all great fights he's been in. They could have gone either way. Sergey Limpinets is another one. That was a fight that it was going to be scheduled, I think, before, and then Limpinets was going to maybe fight Subriel Matias. And then the last one would be Jeremias Ponce, the guy who we saw fight Subriel Matias earlier this year, who I think any of those guys are live guys, and just that next step up where Postol was a bigger name maybe than those guys, but he was a bit past it. I think those guys are all closer to their prime. And I think I'd like to see Elvis against any of those guys. So that's my little matchmaker edition for that one.
That boy can punch. I know, Subriel, put it on him, but that boy can bang, man. So that'd be a real interesting fight to watch. I'd watch that shit.
Yeah, I want to see Ponce back soon because he's one of those guys where he's going to beat somebody he's not supposed to beat. Because I think that, and Jesus, I appreciate you liking those names. You were doing some good matchmaking, so I figured I had to match you a little bit and get some solid names out there. But yeah, no, I think that Ponce would be a great fight. He's been off since the Matias fight. Elvis just fought, so throw that out in the PBC card later this year. Maybe the Canelo Charlo undercard, something like that. I'd be down for that without a doubt.
If it happens, we should get a check. That's all I'm saying.
No, exactly. Yeah, we'll keep this clip out there. There's been no rumors yet, so if we do see rumors about it, I guess you guys will know where they came from. So, Jesus, I appreciate it, because if you hadn't asked that question, we wouldn't have been able to monetize that fight. So, appreciate appreciate that. And like I said, Elvis needs to be tested again. And I agree with that. I don't want to see him take a half step back. Brandon Lee is somebody who they've mentioned, I think, before, but I think Brandon Lee would be a step down. I know he's an undefeated young guy, but I'd rather see Elvis against these guys. The Lipinets, the Ponce, the Akhmedov, those guys are proven at the highest level. Even if they don't win every fight, we know exactly where they stand. I don't know where Brandon Lee stands, so I don't think, to me, I wouldn't want to see that fight. I know people would maybe want to see him fight the undefeated guy, but I'd rather him fight those guys with L's that have actually proven themselves more, if I'm being honest.
I know where he stands. He stands several levels below all those guys you just mentioned. You know what I mean? And I think he would be food for Elvis, bro. That would be, and I want to see it because, you know, I give Brandon Lee all the credit for dusting himself off and getting off the canvas after that.
Hell yeah!
I thought
it was over.
It was over. Yeah, over. I mean, that was some Tyson Fury shit. He got up, what?
Yeah,
and then finishes the fight, right? But against any of those guys you just mentioned, he doesn't get up. And if he does, he's going right back down because those guys know how to close fights, right? And even, you know, like you said, Ponce, Subriel, I think Elvis finishes him, bro. And I don't think it's a close fight. I think Brandon Lee is really just a one-dimensional guy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I got no complaints on that. And Jesus, if you're still tuned in, I know you don't have ESPN Plus, but I just saw Jeremiah Milton did get the 4th round stoppage over his opponent. So we'll see Jeremiah Milton in a big fight coming up. Maybe it is Jalalov or something like that. But I think we've now run the course. We've touched basically everything that's coming up early, either tonight or early this week, and then also last week. So any last final comments or anything before we wrap up the first ever episode of Catch and Counter?
Keep rocking with us. We get better every day. Look, man, you know, I say this all the time. Please support your local fighters. Support your local boxing events. Support, you know, your local guys like us, you know, that are putting the stuff out there, you know, putting people on. Any local fighters want to come on and join the show, you know, sign up. You know, my man's is out there on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. You know what I mean? We got no problem. We can reach out to either one of us and catch and counter, baby.
For sure. And then it's another good shout by Jesus. That's Velasquez. He's a Cuban guy. I think he's like 6 or 7-0 right now against Elvis. Shit, I mean, that'd be another good fight. He's not a known guy at all, but that's a good little deep dive by Jesus. That's the guy who I think that even if it's not right now in a few fights, we'll see him in some of these big fights. But going back to what we said about the local boxing, I was at a local show last week in Wyndon, New Hampshire, a Boston boxing show, and it was just, we always talk about these local shows, but it was a great show overall. We saw some good guys who were on the come up fighting early, and then the main event was Brandon Higgins, who I've gotten to know pretty well. He trains under Mark DeLuca. He trains with Abraham Nova, Michael Hain, and some of those guys who I've been up in the gym with in Boston. He fought an undefeated kid, Kenny Larson. He came in as the B-side, and he put in a hell of a fight. He should have had a knockdown in the first round. Kenny Larson spit his mouthpiece out a few times late as Brandon was getting to him. Brandon ended up losing a split decision, but it was the kind of fight that you love to see and you don't see at a club show often. You have two guys who are high-end club-level guys, even low-end guys who can fight on TV, fighting each other, and I think that's what, like you said, that's what the sport's all about. So if you can support those guys need it more than the guys who are on TV. So if you do have local shows, go support them because I think those shows are as good as it gets. And I've never left a local show not feeling like I got my money's worth at the end of the day.
You know, man, I can't tell you how many boxers that I've talked to, you know, no matter what their level is, that say that, you know, a lot of the reason they stayed in the sport was because of the support of their, you know, the local fans. People show up to these club shows, not necessarily, you know, supporting them financially directly, but just showing up to the fights. You know, people who love boxing, you know, you'd be amazed how much more of a show a fighter is willing to put on if he's got a full crowd of people cheering for him. You know, so just, you know, and then those guys end up becoming, you know, the guys we're talking about on this show, right? Or any other show. Mm-hmm. They end up being on the ESPN cards, the PBC cards, the, you know, the Showtime cards. Those are the guys that, you know, they have to start somewhere, right? Even your Floyd Mayweathers had to start somewhere. So, you know, support your local guys. I guarantee you won't regret it.
Without a doubt. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Last one from Jesus saying, did you guys see Thompson boxing last night? I did not see the card. I think it was on UFC Fight Pass. I know Lukey was always a big Thompson boxing guy. I think it was their final card. I know that Sergey Boachuk was on the card. Kane Sandoval, who we talked to on this platform before, was on the card also. So I did not see the card. I did see some results on it, but I think it's just good to see Thompson Boxing have a last final hurrah and have them kind of get their flowers. Ken Thompson was a big name in the sport for a long time. So it's sad to see that them have their final show. I'll be interested to see where some of their fighters go, but it was, I guess, cool to see them get their flowers and get their final just their final show out of the way. But go back to local fighters. I've been working with a lot of local fighters up in Boston. I know Abraham Nova, who is a big 130-pound contender, is fighting Friday this week, so we'll have more on that on an episode. Our next episode, I know we'll probably even have him on a guest on one of these shows coming up too. I've been talking a lot with him recently, so stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for got to figure out a date now. It could be a Thursday day or something like that. So I know Fridays, some of these next Fridays, I got a few local shows I got to go to, and I know Abraham is fighting on next Friday, so might be a Thursday thing, it might be a Saturday recap thing, might be a Wednesday thing. So either way, be on the lookout for us. Stay up to date with ITR Boxing on YouTube, ITR Boxing on OnlyFans, and ITR Boxing on Instagram, and we'll be able to let you guys know when and where to see our shows. So, Nibs, hell of a first episode, and we shall see where the future takes us. I'm guessing it's going to be a pretty damn good place.
Hey, I'm here with you, baby. Let's do it.
Yes, sir. So thank you once again for everyone tuning in the chat, and we will catch you guys next week. So peace out, everyone.